Hi, let's begin. Let me give you a little bit of a background. So I entered the cybercrime investigation field sometime in 1999 when I set up the Asian School of Cyber Laws. And then over the next decade and a half, I've helped law enforcement agencies around 18 countries in investigating different kinds of cyber cases. Now, I first came across Bitcoin sometime in 2010 when one of the drug mafias was using Bitcoin for payments. That was the first time I actually heard about this. And what happened at that time was that, you know, you would go to a coffee shop where there would be a youngster sitting there and you would give him cash. Then that person, youngster, would convert that cash into something called Bitcoin, which at that time we had no idea what it is. And then he would give you a number, so say 84. Now, a few days later, a book would land up at your house. You would then, it could come through one of the regular e-commerce services. It could be a Harry Potter or any kind of a normal book. And then you would open the book to page 84, tear that page out, cut it into small pieces, and you could put a piece on your tongue. And the moment you do that, the drug would take effect. So these are those chemical synthetic kind of drugs which can be pasted on or brushed onto a piece of paper, and that's how they are consumed. So obviously we were all very amazed by this new technology called Bitcoin, and we were wondering how is it that the criminals are actually trusting it so much. I mean, I know this may sound a little strange, but I always believe that if a technology is to be checked, whether it is actually strong or not, check whether the criminal element is using it. So if you find that hackers are using something, criminals are using it, then you know what, 99% it's a very strong technology. So in fact, when you look at ransomware, I'm sure you all know what ransomware is. Ransomware is when some really sophisticated hackers, they are able to lock or encrypt your entire data, and only if you pay them ransom will they open it out. And that ransom has to be paid in Bitcoin. So when you realize that if a ransomware creator trusts Bitcoin to collect his ransom, well, then we know it's an extremely solid, strong, secure technology. Any questions so far? I'd love to keep hearing your inputs also on this. Would anyone like to add something? You can just unmute yourself and speak. Ideally, if you could also put your video cameras on so we can see each other during the discussion. Would anyone like to add anything at this stage? I hope I'm audible to all of you. Can someone just tell me whether I'm clearly audible?
Yes, Rohas.
Awesome. Awesome. Would you like to add something?
No, I think this is the common experience and what I have also heard till now. In fact, even the most banking parlance also, these ransomwares and all those things are actually paid in Bitcoins.
Correct.
So we have heard this kind of stories.
Sure.
So I think so far so good. I very much am able to relate with you.
Sure. Great. Now let me share my screen.
Quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Why are we not paying it via privacy coins in that case?
Very good. I'm going to come to that. So I am talking about 2010. Okay. At that time, Bitcoin was the only one. And then down the road, privacy coins came. I'm going to get to that once. Yeah. So let me just share my screen. Are all of you able to... Yeah, hi.
Sorry, I'm unable to put on my screen. One question here is that that this was not the intent for which Bitcoin came into being. They were supposed to decentralize the whole financial, so to say, monopoly, with which intent it came into being. But it certainly with whatever you shared just now, it got abused in that way.
It started with that. That's correct.
Yeah. So how did it happen? I mean,
I'm coming to it. I'm coming to it. So are you all of you able to see my screen? Is my screen visible? Are you able to see a mind map? Crypto invest. Great. So
yes,
now
it's clear.
Perfect. Now let's go with this red part which says crimes. Okay. So when we look at the way crime has moved, so we have organized criminals. So these organized criminals are really smart in the sense like they hire really good people to design the technology that they use. You may find, many of you may find that hard to believe, but that's the way it is. So encryption is something that the criminal element has been using for a very, very long time. Now, when we look at the evolution, one of the biggest things which emerged was Tor. or the onion router as it is called. Now that is a protocol which was designed for good purposes. That if you are in a country where your government restricts freedom of speech, you would be able to communicate using this network, which is kind of like a parallel internet. So one is we have the regular internet where Google works. Any site that you can Google, we say that is a regular internet. But then there is also Tor where you need to download a separate browser called the Tor browser. Now that is not going through the regular domain name system. It is not using regular.com. So it is kind of outside the purview of the legal arena today. And inside that Tor, a lot of criminal sites started to pop up. Now, one of the biggest of them was something called Silk Road. Now, Silk Road was set up to buy and sell virtually any illegal product in the world, whether it is drugs, whether it is ammunition, guns, fake documents, everything was available. In fact, I remember when we were doing a research on Silk Road, we found there were discussion forums where people are asking each other, you know what, I want to buy and sell guns to make money in so-and-so part of the world. Which guns would you recommend? Would AK-47 sell well? And then somebody saying, no, do small handguns. They will work better, the profit margin is more. So this became like what we have today, Amazon and Flipkart for the legal world, Silk Road was for the illegal world. And they moved on to Bitcoin completely. And they did more than $1 billion of transactions purely on Bitcoin, because the criminal element realized that this was quite anonymous. Of course, at that time it was believed and said that Bitcoin is totally anonymous, but we know that's not true. Bitcoin is considered pseudo-anonymous, which means on the blockchain, everybody in the world can see all addresses, all transactions, but they don't know the name behind the address. But as time progressed, law enforcement realized it is not so difficult to catch people using Bitcoin, because once you catch a criminal and you have his or her addresses, you can now find out all the transactions that they have done in the past. And that is why a new development called privacy coins happened, as someone correctly asked. So things like Monero, they are privacy coins where you can't see anything. You will not be able to see which address is sending money to whom when. So that was the next level. And today, a lot of savvy criminals have moved on to privacy coins, which I'm going to discuss a little more in detail. So when we look at the world where crypto is today being abused, so we see these darknet markets, we see money laundering happening big time in that, ransomware, scams, stolen funds, and terrorism financing. So a lot of the famous or infamous terrorist organizations today raise money through crypto. There, Bitcoin remains extremely popular, and there's only one simple reason for it. The liquidity of Bitcoin is absolutely amazing. Now, what I mean by liquidity is how easy is it for someone to buy and sell a particular thing? That's called the liquidity of that thing. Now, because Bitcoin was the first and it continues to remain the most popular, virtually any country in the world, you can buy and sell huge amounts of Bitcoin and get it converted into fiat currency. And that is why Bitcoin remains popular for ransomware, for money laundering, for terrorism financing. Certain sophisticated criminals have moved on to newer cryptos like Monero, Zcash, Decred, which are under a category which we call as the privacy coins. So any questions about the overview of this? Money laundering, I'm sure all of you are aware, is basically converting black money into white money. Now, in the good old days, you
Just
could do, yeah.
had a question. Just
Sure.
wanted to understand one thing.
Yeah.
Now, while we have this, just wanted to understand why move to privacy coins when something like tumblers, etc., are also present. Were they not good enough for that?
No, they're not. So what happens when we look at tumblers? So that is something I was going to actually cover a little later. I have it here, but since you've asked, I'll tell you. So you have these mixing and tumbling services. What they do is they tell you to give them the Bitcoin, which is then spread to multiple addresses and then collates again back to a few addresses. Now, because of the inherent nature of the blockchain, we can see all these transactions, but it becomes a little difficult to track down. And I'm going to talk about this more when we come to this element here. Can you see this UTXO and account/balance? Now, there are two kinds of blockchain systems in the world. Things like Bitcoin, which follow UTXO, and things like Ethereum, which follow account balance. So UTXO blockchains can be used for tumbling and mixing, but I'm going to come back to it. I don't want to tackle it right now. I'll just come back to it. Any other questions so far? Okay. So as I was mentioning about money laundering, in the good old days, you could have a coffee shop where you showed a large amount of cash sales, which are not actually happening. But you keep saying that, okay, X number of people came every day, paid by cash. And then you can put the cash into your bank account, pay tax on it, and it becomes white money. But the actual source of that cash may be some illegal activity. Maybe it's extortion, you're selling drugs, but you are using the coffee shop to launder it. So similarly, a lot of cash businesses are used to launder money. Bitcoin just made it a lot easier because people around the world were ready to accept it. You cannot use something which is not acceptable globally as a method of money laundering. So now what could happen is criminals could directly take money through Bitcoin and then transfer it around to other people. And as long as the entire system is accepting Bitcoin, you don't need to touch cash. You don't need to touch the conventional banking system. Across the entire chain, people were ready to accept Bitcoin. So that's how, and that's why so much of cryptocurrencies is used in the criminal world. Any questions?
Yeah, Rohas. Now you gave an example of coffee shop, right? Where the entry of money, we don't know from where it is coming, right? It is because you cannot track. But in crypto, you know the origination of the transaction, right? So how is it? I thought coffee shop example was much more safer than the crypto example.
Yeah, but the problem with the coffee shop approach is, firstly, you have to physically set up a coffee shop, because after all, the tax authorities are also smart. So if you start showing a lot of cash sales, they are bound to visit and see whether what you're doing. Do you actually have a coffee shop? Can that coffee shop sustain the amount of cash you're showing? Let's say your coffee shop is in the back of Beyond and you are showing, I'm getting 20 lakhs of cash every day. They're not going to believe it. You're going to get into legal trouble. In fact, in some cases in the US, they actually monitored restaurants which were being used by the mafia for laundering. They even calculated how many paper, those cloth napkins and tablecloths were being sent for laundering, as in actual washing. And then they were calculating how much of sales are they really making, and then they busted them. So it was not very easy because the law enforcement and tax enforcement was catching them.
Right.
That is the reason when they move to things like Bitcoin, you don't need a physical presence. You don't have to spend lakhs of rupees to set up fake coffee shops. Anybody anywhere in the world could use it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rohas.
Most well. Any other questions?
Rohas here, yes, here just wanted to check that what about casinos and gambling?
That's a very good point. Yes, they are also used for money laundering. But slowly what we are beginning to see is more and more of the laundering is now happening over cryptocurrencies. Because while casinos again are a good way of doing it, there's a lot of constraint. You need physical places set up. Huge amounts of investments have to happen. And plus, even in a casino, you cannot expect 100% of the money to be laundered. You have to follow certain, so that you don't trigger alarms. And that is the reason things are moving more towards crypto. But yeah, definitely casinos are also misused.
Rohas, a question.
Sure.
Statistics by analytical firms in crypto say that percentage of laundered money or criminal money is very less as compared to maybe the
Good
physical world. And also, are you saying it's like a trend now it is going to it to it is more transparent? Because at least the crypto firms whichever are there, the big firms, they always say that the percentage is coming down and not going up.
Sure.
That's the
So,
thing.
the way
So
I
just
look
wanted
at
to
it-
understand, why do you say this?
Sure. So what happens is everyone has a vested interest, right? So there are a lot of people who have a vested interest in saying that crypto is not used because they make money from crypto. So they fund such kind of reports also. I'm not saying all the analytic firms are lying, but there are two major points to remember. One is a lot of this may be, just trying to cover up because you don't want people and governments to look at crypto in the wrong direction. Secondly, what is the source of their data? When you look at a transaction on a blockchain, how do you know what it is for? So here they are doing a lot of guesswork and presuming that, oh, this is not a bad transaction. But who knows? I'll give you a simple example. The market capitalization of Dogecoin, right, which is a meme coin, which has logically no real value purpose, is equal to that of Axis Bank, a highly recognized, reputed bank. So when you begin to see why is there $32 billion stuck inside Dogecoin, how do you know a lot of that is not for criminal purposes? Nobody knows. You look at stable coins. USDT alone does $100 billion of volume every single day. Now, are you trying to tell me we know for sure that out of this 100 billion, how much is illegal and how much is legal? So no, I don't trust those reports totally.
I agree, Rose, but then for that we have regulations like travel rule, etc., which are now there, which make it mandatory. So, I mean, if you're aware about the travel rule, so
Mandatory for what and for whom?
I mean, check when you're doing any transfers. If you're holding money, what's the use? Ultimately, you have to transfer it somewhere,
So
right?
what happens is, what we've got to realize is the world is looking at only a few cryptos. Are you aware that there are so many cryptos that are privately run? See, what the criminal element has realized is that blockchain is a good technology to use. Now, all the blockchain platforms are open source. So I don't have to run on Bitcoin. I can download the Bitcoin software and create my own nodes and call it whatever I want. And now suddenly you have drug coin, you have gun coin, you have so many cryptos which you don't see, but that particular criminal ecosystem flourishes using it. So
But
there are
there are
lots
FATF
of
regulations, right? I mean,
Pardon?
FATF has their own regulations for
That
monitoring. So are you saying that is not good enough? What
no,
FATF is doing for that?
absolutely not. So what happens is when a bunch of us, can I request you all to mute your this thing? I'm getting a lot of disturbance noise in the background. So what we must realize is all these FATF regulations, they apply to regulated entities like banks. They do not apply to the criminal network. So if a bunch of people get together and run their own crypto, how is anybody in the world even going to come to know that it exists? Just like when you're on Tor, Tor is not the only solution. There are so many other parallel internets that run in the world, run by, say, the drug ecosystem, the ammunition ecosystem. We don't even know about the existence of these. So similarly, officially, we are aware of 12,000, almost 13,000 cryptos. Nobody really knows about the few hundred cryptos which are completely running under the radar. So there are lots of complications there. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. No, I'm just looking the way I monitor FATF. They are coming out with more and more stricter regulations for
Yeah,
this.
but the
So,
criminal guys don't care because the criminals are running private cryptos. So there, how would the banks or the government even come to know about the existence? And in fact, that is the only reason that I've started now talking more about crypto investigation and forensics, because I'm beginning to see a completely new ecosystem arising and which is completely under the radar. People are completely unaware of the existence of these systems. So,
all right, that's something new. Thanks.
sure. So, any questions on the types of crimes? Now, before I jump into the applied investigation, let me briefly tell you that there are 11 types of cryptos in the world. So, of course, this is my categorization. Maybe I missed out some categories, but the ones that I'm aware of. So, the first is what I call ready money, which means cryptos which function like regular money. So, Bitcoin being a classic example, you can buy and sell stuff using it. So, that category is called ready money. And that is the category that most governments are monitoring because, sorry, the presumption is that is what is getting misused also. Then we have a concept called open blockchain tokens. These are legally recognized and created under the laws of the Wyoming state of the US. And we call them, or rather the law calls it open blockchain tokens. Then we have hush coins or privacy coins. Now these are slightly special. Whereas a Bitcoin is pseudo-anonymous because we can see addresses and transactions, a privacy coin is anonymous. You can't see who is doing what transaction. Even though it is happening on a blockchain, it's a special blockchain built in such a way that you are able to cover up all these transactions and nobody can see it. Now, very recently, there was a bug found in one of them, which is Monero. In that, if you received Monero and within 30 minutes, if you transfer to somebody else, then your transaction could be tracked down. But that was a bug. It was not there by default. Of course, I'm sure in due time they will fix it. But privacy coins have become quite popular amongst the criminal element. Any questions so far? Okay. The fourth category is what we call application coins. These are unique blockchains built for a particular use case. Just give me 1 second. So an application coin, or so somebody comes out of the business idea. Like somebody said, I want to do video streaming in a decentralized fashion. So that person set up Theta. Somebody said, I want to set up the Airbnb for data storage. So just like people are able to rent out an empty room for a day or two using Airbnb, you can rent out your storage capacity on your disks or your data center using a project called Filecoin. So each of these projects has its own unique crypto, which is usable only inside that ecosystem. And we call those as application coins. Any questions? I hope I'm audible to all of you.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir. Perfectly.
Yes, you were.
Yes.
Sure. So that's the problem with online lectures. I'm so used to physical lectures where I can see people's faces. So anyway, security tokens are just like equity shares, but issued on the blockchain. So, in the real world, companies come out with IPO, they take funding, give shares to investors. You can do all that on the blockchain and you would call it a security token. Of course, that's a highly regulated area. So across the world, a security token will always be regulated, because all countries otherwise would call it illegal because they have securities laws in place. Then we have non-fungible tokens. I'm sure all of you have heard of the word NFT. It's become quite popular nowadays. Now, what is the difference between an FT and an NFT? What is the meaning of fungibility? When we look at, say, a note, a currency note, can we say that all currency notes of, say, 500 rupees are identical to each other in terms of value? Can we say that?
Yes, we can.
Actually, I'll tell you why we can't. Because what if I have an old note from before demonetization? That 500 rupee note is worth zero. Secondly, what if my note is stolen? Nobody will accept it. So physical paper notes are not fungible truly, because they are not always identical, because like I said, they could be demonetized. But look at the money in your e-wallet. So suppose you have a bank app. In that app, you have 500 rupees and I have 400 rupees. Each rupee is identical to each other rupee, because in the electronic version, all money is the same. All rupees are considered the same. There's no difference between your 400 and my 400. But that is why it is called fungible. So the meaning of the word fungible in finance is when one unit is equal to the other unit in all respects. NFTs are different. So when I look at one painting and I make it into an electronic version, and then I take another painting and make it electronic, those two are not identical. Each painting has a different artist, different value in the market. So we call them non-fungible. When two units of something are not identical, they are called non-fungible. Is that clear? Is the concept clear? Yes, yes. Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Sir, I have a doubt. For example, if I'm a painter and I paint a peacock, and I do it as an NFT, so is it necessary that that peacock cannot be replicated? That peacock painting cannot be replicated? What if I do the same? I sell it, and what if I do the same peacock again?
Sure.
Wouldn't it be the same?
Very good question. So what happens is, when we look at the NFT world, I'm not going to go too much into detail because right now our focus is on the investigation. Ideally, what you would do is when you create a digital art, as the artist, you would say how many units are available. Like, famous artists also, they sell the reprints also. But each reprint is usually numbered. And then it's considered to be an official or a licensed reprint. So similarly, when you create a graphical art, you can decide as the artist how many copies are available, and based on that, the pricing would happen in the market. But like I said, I won't go too much into detail into that right now. What I want to talk about is NFTs are heavily used for money laundering. You must be regularly reading in the media that some random pieces of things are being sold for 10 and 20 million dollars, which makes zero sense. Why would anybody? Just think logically. Some NFTs make sense because maybe they give you an intellectual property right, or maybe like CryptoKitties, they are collectible games. They are smart contracts which actually do stuff. But when you hear about a random piece of graphical art being sold for millions, chances are there's some money laundering happening in the background, because in the conventional world, art is one of the best ways of laundering money and being a store of value over decades. And just like the physical world of art is used for money laundering, all that has now also moved to NFTs. Then we have algorithmic stable coins. So a stable coin is something which is supposed to be very stable in value. So let's say it maintains $1 value because the issuer is holding the dollars in its bank account against that. But that's not always the case. In an algorithmic stable coin, the stability is maintained by the technology and not by the money backing it in a bank account. Of course, my personal experience is algorithmic stable coins don't work, and a lot of their technology is regularly being impacted with bugs and they keep going up and down and crashing, but it is an emerging area. Then we have governance tokens, which is just like voting. You buy tokens so that you are able to vote on how that particular project will evolve in the future. Any questions so far? Then we have public blockchain natives. So when you hear about platforms like Ethereum, what is special about them is they allow people to create tokens. So when you look at Bitcoin, you cannot create another token on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. You can do that on a side chain, but Bitcoin says I will only run one thing, which is Bitcoin. So does Monero, so does Litecoin. But platforms like Ethereum, Cardano, Solana, they say anybody in the world can come and create tokens on top of this. And the native of that blockchain is what we are calling a public blockchain native. So Ether. So if you want to create something on the Ethereum platform, you have to pay fees using Ether, but then you can create your own token. And there are hundreds of thousands of such tokens being created. Any questions? Then we have asset backed. So we've already seen the world's first coffee coin, came up in Brazil a few months ago, used for the entire coffee ecosystem. We have the marijuana, grass, ganja, known as different words in different countries. They are legal in some countries, like even in the US. Some states have legalized ganja and some have not. So the banks are not giving the ganja industry or the marijuana industry banking services. So they have set up their own tokens on Ethereum and other platforms, and only their community uses that. So instead of a regular bank, they are now using tokens on Ethereum for their transactions. I'm not saying they are all illegal, but because they are not legal in all states, they are forced to use such kind of technologies because they don't get banking services. And then finally, we have lending, borrowing cryptos. These are for, staking, lending your crypto. Somebody borrows and then pays you interest. So there are some cryptos which specialize only in those kind of use cases. So whenever we talk about cryptos, please remember, don't use the word cryptocurrency because that confuses you. Then you believe that every crypto is a currency. No. Cryptos are of 11 types and 2 of them are used for currency: ready money and privacy coins. Other cryptos are not suitable for use as regular money. So calling them cryptocurrencies is always a misnomer, and that is why I always prefer to use the word crypto rather than cryptocurrency. Any questions on these 11 types?
Yes, sir. So there is one question, means for the application coin. So all the others like security tokens, algorithm, these are the specific type of the application coin, if I'm not wrong.
No. Why I wouldn't say that is because a security token is like giving you ownership of a company or a startup. That is the whole meaning of a security. Like an equity share, you're getting ownership. But in an application coin, that's not the case. You don't own anything. So that platform will issue millions of coins. You can buy those coins to transact on the platform, but it does not give you ownership. I
Okay,
hope that clarifies.
So that is like the pay and use model, right? Means
Pay and use model, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
And but the last one, sir, the lending and the borrowing cryptos, I thought it's a specific application that will deal with the lending and the borrowing functionality.
Yeah, so that's different. Like when you look at Aave, what it does is it allows you to actually, I don't want to go too much into that detail, it'll become a separate session in itself. But these are built for a very particular use case. So Aave enables thousands of people to create these kind of yield farming opportunities. And it specializes only in that, whereas a Filecoin only works if you want to rent out your data storage. So based on these functions, we can separate them. And which is why when the government tomorrow comes out with a law to regulate crypto, there cannot be one single law which regulates all cryptos. As of today, SEBI would automatically be able to regulate security tokens. RBI would already be able to do, let's say, ready money and privacy. But for the others, the government will have to figure out which regulator would be able to do that. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir, it answers.
Awesome. Now that we've seen the type of crimes and the type of cryptos, let's quickly jump to the applied investigation. Like as an investigator, what is it that you need to do? So one thing you need to understand is this concept of addresses. It's like a bank account, but the difference is when you create a blockchain address, it is not just one account number that you end up creating. You actually create 3 or 4 depending upon the blockchain. So there is going to be a private key, which is going to be used to do transactions. There is going to be an address which you share with the whole world. People can send you crypto to that address. But once the crypto hits that address, the only way to transfer it is by using the corresponding private key. And if someone else gets your private key, your crypto is gone. So now different blockchains and different cryptos, their addresses look different. Their keys look different. Some generate 4 kinds of things, some generate 3. So as an investigator, you would need to understand how do addresses work across different cryptos. Then we have centralized exchanges and we have decentralized exchanges. So what's the difference? A centralized exchange would be run by a company. So for example, in India, we have so many of them. They will carry out KYC. They will have some anti-money laundering in place. They will connect to your bank account to make sure that white money is moving. But a decentralized exchange doesn't do any of this. A decentralized exchange is just like a website. Say Uniswap. Anybody in the world can go there, connect their wallet, say the MetaMask wallet, and then you can create liquidity pools and do transactions, and there is absolutely zero KYC or AML. There is no way on earth that anybody knows what is going on. So these are the 2 kinds of exchanges that we regularly see. Any questions? I hope it's
No,
all clear and audible.
Yes, sir. It's clear.
Then we have decryption and password breaking. So criminals may be using encryption to keep their wallets also in an encrypted form. So now here we need to do the conventional age-old concepts of decryption and password breaking. We have tools available for that, and we need to get in, because let's say it's a criminal with a cell phone. Cell phone has a passcode on it and the data is encrypted, but you know he's got wallets in it. Now, first step would be to get into the phone. Then you can recover the wallet files, and then you can figure out what addresses were being used and what transactions were being done. So this would be more conventional. Disk forensics, again, very conventional, where deleted data can be recovered using forensic software. Just like we do it in the regular world, we will have to do it in the crypto world. Then we have explorers. So what happens is, in all these public blockchains, all the transactions are broadcast on a public blockchain. So public blockchain explorer is like a user interface or a viewer where you can see everything, just like a bank account would be. So when you look at someone's bank account statement, now imagine you are able to see everyone's statement publicly. That's an explorer, and that's one of the best tools that an investigator would use. We have memory forensics. So when a criminal is using these cryptos, some data may be in the RAM or in the temporary memory. We have blockchains where there is the temporary files which are into something called the mempool, the memory pool. So doing forensics of that. We have network forensics where when data is going over the internet or over Wi-Fi networks, over physical networks, we are able to track that using packet sniffing and other conventional technologies. So that would also fit into crypto investigation. Search and seizure is a very different ballgame here. When you are trying to seize data from or an evidence from a criminal, when you do it in the conventional world, things are actually easier. Even in the regular cyber world, things are easier because we know what we are looking for. We know we are looking for certain photographs, videos, or text. But when it comes to cryptos, it's quite confusing. What are we even looking for? There are 13,000 cryptos. All of them have addresses which look different. So effectively, you are looking for a bunch of numbers or alphanumeric strings. And in any computer in the world, you will anyway find millions of such strings. So trying to figure out which of these strings may be a wallet or an address or a private key is again a very big nightmare, which makes search and seizure quite complex. And another problem is, let's say you even seize this private key. How do you know that the criminal has not shared that with other people? The moment they realize one guy is arrested, his counterparts could immediately move all the crypto out and send it somewhere else. So even though you have seized the private key, if you did not immediately transfer the cryptos to a safe address, they could be completely siphoned off in seconds. So search and seizure takes on a whole different meaning when it comes to crypto. Any questions so far? I hope I'm not going too fast.
No, sir. No, sir.
Awesome. Then we have transactions. Now, when it comes to transactions, I'd like to now jump to this UTXO versus account balance. When we look at Bitcoin, transactions happen in a very different manner than what we are used to. In Ethereum, things are very simple. Every Ethereum address has a balance. So suppose I have 5 ETH, you have 2 ETH. I send you 1. So I have 4 and now you have 3. Like a regular bank account, everything seems normal. Account balance system. But in a UTXO blockchain like Bitcoin, things are not like. Suppose I have 5 Bitcoin and I want to pay you 1. I cannot do that. I cannot do 1 out of that and this becomes 4. No, all 5 will be sent. 1 will go to you and 4 will go to a new address. And all the change in a transaction goes into that new address. So when you go to a shop and you buy something worth 320 and you give a 500 rupee note, the person returns change to you. That's how Bitcoin works. The entire amount goes out. Some goes to the recipient, some goes to a new address. And that is the whole concept of UTXO, and it has its own plus points. So when we are investigating, things become much more difficult when we investigate a UTXO blockchain, and that is where transactions take on a whole different meaning. When we investigate an account balance kind of a blockchain, transactions are quite easy to investigate. I hope I was able to make that clear. I mean, there's a lot more to this. I'm just trying to give you an overview. Any questions so far?
No, sir. So what happens to those coins which are getting transferred to the new addresses, or is it just random addresses that no one needs them?
It is,
or-
yeah. So new addresses are created on the fly by your wallet and by the system. That is why in the world of Bitcoin and UTXO blockchains, we say for every transaction, create new addresses, because addresses are free and you can create billions and trillions of them without any fear of 2 people getting the same address, because that's how the encryption algorithms work. So because of which, now just imagine how many millions of addresses are being created all the time just for regular transactions, which is why when an analytics firm turns around and says, we have calculated how much is good transaction and how much is bad, I'm very skeptical, because that's how UTXO works. There are going to be millions of addresses being created. How can anybody claim to know who created the address or what it is used for? When you are monitoring a transaction, there is virtually no way of knowing what's happening. As you go deeper into UTXO, you will understand what I'm trying to say. Then we have Tor and dark web. Again, since a lot of the illegal websites use crypto, an investigator needs to know how to analyze and investigate Tor and dark websites. And then finally, we have wallets. Very, very interesting concept. So your crypto is held in a wallet. So what does it actually mean? Let's take an example. Suppose you have a bank account. You have a balance in it and you delete the app. Does your money disappear? Or can you get your money back? If you delete your banking app by mistake, does your money disappear?
No.
Because there is a centralized entity called a bank. They will say, don't worry, reinstall the app. They will re-authenticate you. And then you are able to get your money or you see your money. But in the world of crypto, it doesn't happen like that. The moment you delete your app, and if you have not backed up your keys, you will lose all the cryptos. Trust me, I've done that in the past. I didn't realize it when I was very new to the world of Bitcoin. I mined a little bit, played around, then I thought this is never going to have value, and I deleted it. Today, there is no way for me to even get those back because I have deleted my private keys without backing them up, and my crypto is gone forever, which is why wallets need to be analyzed very carefully. And wallets are of various types. There is the web wallets, mobile wallets, paper wallets, hardware wallets, exchange wallets. So there are different types, and each of them are very different from each other, and an investigator needs to know how to investigate. Yeah, I think somebody had just raised their hands. They had a question. Can you please ask me?
Can we link the Silk Route case?
Come again?
Can we have an idea of what Silk Route
Sure.
investigation was?
So in Silk Route, what had happened was Ross Ulbricht and a bunch of people, they created this Tor site. Can you please mute? I'm getting a lot of disturbance noise. Yeah. So what this person did was they set up this dark website called Silk Road, where people could come and list illegal things like drugs and guns and other things. And it was just like, you see the user interface of Amazon where you can see all the products, click and buy. You could do the same thing for illegal things, and what was used was only Bitcoin. Now, why Silk Route becomes an important case study is because the prosecutors actually did a very detailed investigation. Then they were able to prove all that in court, and the court gave multiple life imprisonment sentences to the accused person in that. And the documents of that are absolutely amazing. I will share them with you. You know, the actual original court documents and how you should investigate a blockchain. I always consider that to be like the Bible for crypto investigators. But right now, I won't be able to go too much into detail. It's a huge case study, but I'll definitely share the documents with you.
Sir, one doubt, sir. How can we find the wallet company from the addresses?
Yeah, so what happens is, again, like I said, that is something, you know what, let me show you a small example, right? I will show you a small example of what a wallet actually looks like so that your concept can become a little clearer. Are you able to see my screen where it says generate paper wallet? Are you able to see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let me click on Bitcoin. Now I have just created a Bitcoin wallet. This is what a wallet looks like. You see these numbers here? This is a wallet. So this is the address which I can now send to the world, and people can send crypto to that address. And this is the private key that I can use, and only this private key. I can use that private key to do transactions and to move my Bitcoin from that address. And then there is a public key. So, you know, in encryption, we have public key, private key. And this public key's shorter version is address. And this private key's shorter version is WN. So in Bitcoin, this is what it looks like. But when I look at another crypto, like Ethereum, I see now there are only three things. There's private, public, and address. There's no WIF being created. So now imagine there are 13,000 cryptos in the world, and there would be hundreds of different kinds of wallets. Now this data is going to be now kept in a mobile app. We would call it a mobile wallet. It could be kept on a piece of paper. We call it a paper wallet. So this is what a wallet actually does. It holds this data. So the word wallet may not be the correct way because we usually have a different think when we think of the word wallet. But basically a wallet's job is to keep this data safe. Because if this private key is not kept safe, you can do nothing. Your crypto is gone. So that's a simple idea of what a wallet would look like. I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Then from a tech point of view, as a crypto investigator, you would need to understand consensus mechanisms. There are 80 plus consensus mechanisms. So you may have heard of proof of work, proof of stake. There are many, many more used by different blockchains. And it's important for an investigator to understand that the blockchain I'm investigating, what are the consensus mechanisms used? Some blockchains use multiple. Then we need to understand digital signatures because all transactions will be digitally signed. We need to understand encryption, both from the wallet point of view as well as from the disk forensics point of view. We need to understand forking. So when a blockchain splits into multiple blockchains, what happens? So at one time, Bitcoin broke into two because some people wanted to technologically improve Bitcoin, but some people said no. Now, blockchains are very democratic. If you run a node, you have a voice. So some people said, let's improve. Some said no. So the blockchain broke into two. And at the time of this split, everybody who had certain amount of Bitcoin was given equivalent free Bitcoin Cash because that was the name of the new one. So that process is called forking. We have soft forks and hard forks, which have different implications. So we need to understand that. We need to understand what hashing means, what public blockchains are. There are about 10 very popular public blockchains like Ethereum, Solana, Cardano. What do they do? And as an investigator, we need to understand them so that we can then apply it in our cases. We need to understand a little bit about what smart contracts are, how are they automating things, how DAOs operate or decentralized autonomous organizations. That's a completely different ballgame. In today's world, we have people and we have companies. But DAO is a completely different invention. It is a smart contract controlled by multiple people who can then give their vote what to do with the money collected by the DAO. And now certain governments are recognizing a DAO as a company in itself. So we need to understand all these concepts to really investigate cases. And finally, we need to understand what this whole UTXO and account balance blockchains are, how are they different, and how does the investigation differ. then we also need to understand the different services in the crypto industry. It is not just what we talked about right now, but now we see there is a whole ecosystem. There are automated liquidity protocols, which allow anybody in the world to create liquidity in crypto pairs. So we need to understand what that is. There are entities who offer blockchain as a service. We need to know what that means and how it operates and where the evidence is found in those services. We need to see what consortium blockchains are. DAO, what I just referred to you a few minutes ago, DAO. We need to understand how the both type of exchanges work, centralized and decentralized. Faucets. Faucets are very interesting. They give you free crypto to try out. So we need to understand who's running the faucet, how does it work. There are test faucets, there are live faucets. Then there are full node operators. So when a blockchain is running, all the data is replicated across all the nodes. A node is like a computer holding all the data. So there are some people who will be running full nodes, but not doing mining. There are some people who will be doing mining. So we need to understand the difference and what kind of evidence can be created where. We need to understand different fundraising because sometimes frauds and scams happen here. So, we need to understand about ICOs, IEOs, IDOs. There are lots of different ways of fundraising. That's where scams could take place. We need to understand liquidity providers. Then there is master node operators. There are miners and mining pools, mixers. So we spoke about tumblers in the beginning. Mixers, tumblers are very similar. There are oracles who provide data to the blockchain and pull data from the blockchain to the outside world. An oracle could be inbound or outbound. It could be hardware or software. And then, of course, we need to understand the whole concept of wallets. So there are so many different wallet service providers. There are HD wallets, paper wallets. We need to understand all that. So in this diagram, I've tried to give you a bird's eye view that as an investigator, what are the different things that you need to keep in mind? And then what are the things you need to do? Now, I have started this community called C4. All of you have joined the Telegram group for that. And what I want to do here is, one is, of course, give education and knowledge on this, but secondly, also develop the best practices. So I remember when I got into the world of cyber investigation in '99, we did not have much best practices to look for. So we had to develop our own. I see the same situation today in crypto. So what we saw in cyber investigation 20 years ago, I'm seeing that in crypto investigation today. There are no real best practices available. There is no manual which you could follow about what to do. So in C4, I'm hoping that over a period of time, we will build these manuals, build these best practices so that we can have now a complete ecosystem of investigators, prosecutors, enforcement agencies who understand crypto investigation. Questions?
Hi, Rose. Just was curious, which countries have allowed DAOs now? I mean, have recognized DAOs?
It's the US, and specifically it is a state called Wyoming, where they have now allowed a DAO to be automatically incorporated as an LLC or a limited liability company. In other parts of the world, DAOs are not recognized, so they are neither legal nor illegal. But Wyoming, specifically in the US, has allowed now DAOs to become LLCs. So I would say they've probably taken the lead in this.
Okay, cool. And just wanted to understand one thing, a very good initiative about C4, what you brought up. Just wanted to understand, like, there are many analytics firm also, and there are also fraud forums out there, the CFPs and all the other associations who have their own trainings for crypto. So how do you see their trainings being different? I just wanted to understand, like,
Sure.
from this.
I'll be honest, I have not really looked at their training. So maybe their trainings are amazing. I don't know. But the way I'm looking at things is we are going to do things in a very practical manner. For me, theory is not as important as the practical is. So I want to bring my 20 plus years. So I've spent about 15, 20 years in cyber investigation and now about 6-7 years in crypto. So I want to bring both these experiences together and figure out all the latest ways in which we can do investigation and forensics. And I believe also my background in blockchain architecture would help. And that is why I want more and more people from the community to get together. And I don't want to create proprietary material. I want to create open source material. Like, why should people have to pay a huge amount of money to learn about all this? So yes, we can definitely have paid programs. But I want that the documents we develop should be available to everybody in the world, not just to paying members. Other than that, I'm not saying anything negative about anyone else. If they've developed training, that's amazing. It's good if they have, but I have not seen them. Hope that
Thank you,
answers your
Rose.
question.
Yes, thank you. It's a very good initiative. I've been following Asian School as well in the past, and it's a good initiative because the
Thank you,
other
sir.
ones are pretty expensive actually. So appreciate the initiative. Thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions?
Roas,
Yeah.
hello, Roas.
Hi, come in.
Yeah, so did you, I don't know if you mentioned it earlier on, will there be certification? And since everything is going to be open source, how creditable, most institutions want to deal with a creditable organization. So in your past 20 years of experience, how have your students been treated in their job market?
Sure. That's a good question. So I'm very happy to say that some of the top investigators in the world are my students. So we've done a very large amount of training across 18 countries. And yes, the industry's been very happy with that. So what happens is when we look at it, at the end of the day, which certificate you carry is not important. You should be able to answer the right questions in the interview. And if you get the job, you should be able to do what you're supposed to do. The certificate kind of just lands you at the interview stage. So I've always believed that if you do things practically, you are able to then handle all sorts of investigations. And that's the kind of thinking I want to bring in here. I have not yet announced or designed the course. I'm still thinking about it. So if you guys feel that, yes, you do need a course for this, please let me know and I'll design one and I'll try to keep it as affordable as possible, of course. And I want, to start developing these best practices so that at least people of our community are able to do this. And I want everybody in the world to be a part of this community. There will never be a membership fee. C4 will never charge anyone for being a member. Let everybody in the world benefit from these discussions. So what discussion we have done like today, I want to do this on a regular basis, open to the world, no fees for that. And then slowly over a period of time, we'll figure out paid trainings also. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Most welcome.
Answers.
And I'd especially like it if all of you in your own countries, cities, area of influence, start talking to people about this. Whatever I've discussed today, I will give you the link to this mind map. Please feel free to use it, share it with other people. Start giving sessions yourself. If you feel that you can add value in a certain part, start doing it. No one's stopping you. Use social media, make YouTube videos, post it on LinkedIn. Let's educate the world. Any other question?
Hi, Rohas.
Hi.
Rohas, one question here. That is that blockchain that you mentioned that the transactions are completely transparent, as in the movement of cryptos can be very well seen, except for the of course for the privacy coins. But then when it comes to the originator or the receiver, that anonymity still persists. So as we understand that exchange, they do have the KYC and the due diligence performed on.
I think you muted yourself by mistake.
How is that possible that that both this anonymity as well as that KYC can marry each other? Where does that?
Sure. So what happens is, that is the reason a savvy criminal will not use a crypto exchange, because he knows that some KYC would have been done, some bank account has been linked. So the savvy criminal will use the blockchain directly. So you may have noticed that when you go to a regular peer-to-peer platform and you buy Bitcoin, the time taken is longer, but when you buy it on a centralized exchange, it's virtually instant. I don't know if you've noticed that. That's because in a centralized world, transactions actually happen through liquidity pools kept by the exchange. So people can buy and sell within the pool. It happens instant. But when you look at a public blockchain, things are slower, but all transactions get recorded on the public blockchain forever. So they are two very different things. And that is why the investigation of these two is completely different from each other. I'm unfortunately not able to answer that in this video because it'll take quite some time to explain it, but they're very different from each other. That is the reason we have CEX and DEX as two very different animals to tackle.
Thanks so much.
Sure. Any other questions?
Yeah. So for the C4 program, what is the?
I'm not able to hear you.
Rohas, for C4 program, what is the prerequisite?
Well, so like I said, I've not yet announced any course. I'm still thinking about it, but as and when I design that, I will let you know. But ideally, there should not be too much of a prerequisite because very few people already have this training. We need to start for people who have virtually zero training in this. So I would say a basic level of tech savviness is more than enough. I mean, anybody who knows how to download and handle a mobile application for their banking has the basic knowledge in place. And now you need to build upon it to understand the crypto investigation. But having said that, I've not really designed a course. C4 is simply a community where I want people from across the world to exchange ideas and we come out with best practices. I'm still to design a course for this. Any other questions?
Rohit, quick question from me.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, what are the skills required for a person to go into this sector?
So like I said, I have not yet designed the course, so I will let you know what skills, but what I'm showing you on the screen right now, this whole mind map. So if you are going into this field, you should understand all the words written here. Once you have a knowledge of all this, you will be able to investigate a lot of the cases. I'm not saying all, because some cases may have a higher level of complexity, but all the things that you see in this mind map is what every investigator should know and understand.
So I read somewhere regarding DeFi and CeFi.
Yeah,
So
sure.
can you give some idea on it?
Yeah, sure. So what I would recommend is that if you go on to my website, which is rohasnagpal.com, I'll just open it up. So what I want, if you are very new to the field, then just click on the courses on top and there's something called Get Started with Crypto. It's totally free. First do this. It just got 13 lessons, very simple to do. And every Saturday at 3 p.m., I do an Instagram live where I answer all your questions. So today is also a Saturday. So at 3 p.m., you can come on Instagram live. I'm at Rohas Nagpal and you can ask me questions. So first step, I want you all to do this free course. I don't even need your email address. I'm not here to collect your data. Just click and start reading the course. I do not take your personal information. Once you do this, then if you want to go to the next level, you can go to this mind maps. So what I just showed you is also a mind map. And for DeFi, I have created a separate one, which explains the whole concept of decentralized finance, which is all this. I can't discuss that very shortly, but I've made videos on this also. So I want you to look at that. And then there is this playbook here. If you click on it, so this is a free book that I've written, quite detailed. Just click here, download. Again, I don't need your data. Don't worry about that. Just download the book. It's a PDF. Read it. Once you do that free course and you read this playbook, I think you would reach a reasonably good level. And then you would move ahead to learn all these things.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
How do we get this mind map for investigation and forensic?
I am going to post it right now on the Telegram group. And secondly, if you just go to my website and click on this word mind maps here. So let me just put the address also on the chat. All right. So I put the address of my website. Just go there and click on mind maps, playbook, podcast, live, whatever. And I hope to see some of you live at 3 p.m. on Instagram every Saturday. Yeah. Any other questions?
Hello.
Yeah.
So as long as any criminal has bitcoins, his identity as his address, right?
Oh yeah. So on the blockchain, addresses are tracked, not people.
Addresses are the identity.
Addresses are identifiers, and you can have multiple. Now, what usually happens is once when a criminal is caught, right? That is when you get to know his public address and you can see what all they have done in the past. That is one thing. Secondly, let's say someone takes ransomware from you. Now that ransomware has to go to a particular address. Then we start to track those. So like this, over a period of time, different people have built databases of known criminal addresses also across different blockchains. But of course, once you get deeper, you'll realize how this is done.
But in real world, we can't use cryptocurrency.
What do you mean by that?
Means if he goes in our local market.
Oh, you can. Many countries you can. So for example, in El Salvador, Bitcoin is legal tender. You can go to a McDonald's there and buy burgers using Bitcoin. Slowly in different countries, like if you go to the Dogecoin website, they have a list of hundreds of places which buy and sell stuff using Dogecoin. So many cryptos are now becoming usable in day-to-day life. And I think over the next few years, that will simply go up. So as time progresses, more and more businesses some airlines have started to accept Bitcoin. So the usage is really growing, and that is why I believe that again, I remember when cyber investigation was very new, a lot of people would say, but so many criminals don't use cyber. And at that time we said, over the next few years, this will happen. And today you can't even imagine investigating a crime without knowing some element of cyber. Soon a time will come where almost every crime will involve an element of crypto.
Rohas, I have a question.
Sure.
Just wanted to confirm there is no way we can trace an individual holding any type of cryptocurrency. I mean, we can only trace back to his or her address only, not the individual's identity, right?
As of right now, that's true. We can get to the address, but if that person has used that address multiple times in the past, then we can get to know all the other people who are in. And then usually in this chain, it's a matter of getting one address. So when one criminal slips up or one ransomware guy's address is used in multiple places, that's how we start to then build a chain. And that is why the Silk Road investigation reports, which I will share with you, they give us ideas about how to do this investigation.
Okay, thank you.
Most welcome. Any other questions?
Rohas, where does Hyperledger comes in this,
Sure,
or
that's a
it is
good-
not related at all?
Not really at all, because Hyperledger is a software which is used to create blockchains, and those are usually private blockchains. I have not seen the criminal world using Hyperledger. So in the criminal world, I have seen private blockchains, but they will usually use frameworks such as multi-chain, Bitcoin, Monero to spin up their own. They don't use Hyperledger Fabric. So Hyperledger Fabric primarily is being used in the corporate world in some networks, not really in the criminal world. Yes. Okay, it was great speaking to all of you. I hope you enjoyed the session. I will share the video recording on the Telegram group. Now from your side, I want you to invite your friends onto the group, and let's again plan a discussion very soon where we will actually start looking at best practices. And I'll very sure soon design a course and share it with you. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Okay, I'll take one last question. Tell me.
Actually, I've gone through the entire meeting and understood what you're trying to convey. But actually, I am in this space for last 5 years. So, is there anything like wherein people with experience in crypto can also get? Because all of this I was fairly aware about.
Sure, definitely. So I want people like you to help me to design best practices, to teach the courses that we are planning. So why don't you directly message me after this call, and let's take it ahead on that.
Sure.
I look forward to that. If any of you here also, like I mentioned, have the expertise, or you know people who have the expertise, please invite them onto the community, and let's take things ahead full speed. So nice speaking to all of you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. And
Yeah, thank you so much.
Most welcome.
Thank you.